Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to my journey to my early retirement. So, before I go on and just continue my story of where I left off, I kind of want to go over some reasons, some of my whys, some of my reasons why, right? So, what I mean by that is reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So, I know you obviously don't know what I'm doing now, but I'm telling you some reasons why I am in the position that I'm in, right? So after me and Kaylee got married in 2018, and I told you my mishap with filing incorrectly and owing $3,600 and figuring out how to get the money for that, like I said, it really hurt me inside that I'm just working for what, and I pay taxes and all this stuff just to owe a bunch of money at the end of the year, and it didn't make any sense to me. So I started researching and doing all this stuff on taxes and trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong? A bunch of stuff clicked when I started doing that. So part of my whys is that I didn't want that to happen again. I didn't want to be just that guy that lives life and goes through life just saying, "Oh, everything just happens to me." I figured out what happened, and I'm going to figure out how to fix it so it doesn't happen again. So that was a big factor in one of the whys, because I just didn't want to be that person that's just ignorant and it just plays victim to stuff because I don't understand it, right? So I figured out, okay, I want to learn this. It's pretty important, right? So once I started learning about the taxes and I told you about real estate, started to come in involved with all that stuff, and I said, okay, this makes sense. I'm starting to see why people like real estate now. So I was trying to figure out how can I get some. So my goal was to get an investment property anyway. We were going to continue to live in our house, and we were trying to figure out a way to get an investment property. So around this time too, I'm looking around at all these houses. I've never used to do this, I never even did it growing up really. But I started paying attention to the real estate. I started looking in my parents' neighborhood that I grew up in, and I started seeing all the houses that look like they have just been super deferred maintenance. They were falling apart. One looked vacant, and I'm like, this is like when I started to really think, oh, maybe I could get one of these houses somehow. Obviously, I just was like, I need some kind of money in order to get into something like that. And I saw all these houses around those times, 2018 and 2019, that were getting flipped or getting bought, and yeah, basically they were all getting flipped at the time. Being bought for 35 grand, 55 grand, getting flipped for 270, 240 within a few months. So I remember looking at this one house, and I remember calling the broker. I had no money at the time still. I'm trying to find out how I can get a piece of real estate. So I just called the broker. I said, hey, I see this house that you guys have for sale. I'm just curious about it. And he says, oh, actually, we just took an offer on that today. And I said, oh, man. I said, you mind me asking what the offer was? And he said, sure. It was 55 grand. So they were asking 85 grand. So again, in 2018, 2019, that's the kind of stuff that was happening. These people bought this house for 55 grand, and I watched it within 4 months get flipped for about 240. So right then I'm like, oh man, I knew that was one of those houses. I knew this was one. So I calculated everything in my head at the time. And granted, they did it in 4 months, so they had to have had a good crew. But regardless, I said, okay, well, I could do the same thing. I would just have to get a good crew or do some of the work myself or whatever. It might take longer, but I knew that was a deal. So I watched that deal happen. Saw another property. Oh, wow, look at this one. Super cheap. Someone bought it for another 20 grand less than what it was going for. Flipped that house. It took a little longer, but again, from around 25 grand, I think they bought it for, to, I think, 240,000, which was crazy because I'm looking at it going, I watched this one now too. So this whole time I'm like, all right, I know I'm heading the right direction because everything that I see is working out for other people just the same way it would if I decided to get involved with the deal. So now I'm just trying to find money. So as you know, 2020 comes around and everybody's plans got shot out of the water. Whatever you were trying to do, you had to either steer another direction or try to figure out another path, right? So the same thing with me. I'm looking for money. I'm like, I think I have an idea. I have an idea in my head that I'll get to. And I'm like, I think I can get some money. I think I know where I can find some. And then deals just started becoming scarce and the prices of everything just went up. So whatever money I thought I was going to have that might have been enough for, let's say, a down payment on a hard money loan to fix and flip, any of that kind of stuff, I would have to come up with 2-3 times as much as what I thought I was going to be able to get. So there goes those plans. But I mean, I didn't let it stop me. I just knew, oh, okay, so we're in different times now. Times are changing rapidly. How am I going to do this now? I'm just going to let the economy and all this other outside sources take me down and just keep me victim. I wasn't going to let that happen either. So I decided, okay, I got to do something kind of crazy. I have to figure out a way to get this money. And at the time, I know it's very controversial, but I had a 401k with the current company I was at, doing a bunch of rate work. I worked on an island, government island, won't say which island, and I was getting prevailing wage money for it at the time as an apprentice. So I had some money that was sitting in there. And again, I was fortunate enough to be able to be an apprentice, working with places like that and making the money that I was making. So I was like, I'm young enough. I can tap into that money and use it to invest in an asset that's going to pay me. So that way the money that I'm using is just being used now instead of waiting until I retire in my 60s, right? So I said, I know I can make that money back, whatever money, penalties, all of it aside. That didn't bother me if I was using it now to make me money now and help me now. So I thought, okay, most people would steer me clear of that and say, don't touch your 401k. And I completely understand that if that's the path that you choose and that you're looking for the longevity in the long run and you're playing the safer game. I get it. Like I said, I started off with higher, income to my standards. So it was more or less like I had just enough money to make it by. So how can I ever get farther unless I do drastic things, right? I would have to either just drastically make more money somehow or drastically lower my expenses, which is not possible. So they only had a couple options, and it's basically to make more money was really the only option I decided I'm going to figure out, right? So I decided, okay, it's 2020 now, all this crazy stuff's going on. I'm trying to figure out how to get my money. And I'm talking to my employer at the time, and he's kind of trying to steer me clear as well. And I'm kind of not letting him do that to me, right? I'm like, you're just my employer. I understand you're looking out for me and everything, but at the same time, I'm making my own decisions in life, right? So if it's the money that I worked for and that I earned, I felt like it was money that I could use. So I'm having a hard time with him and trying to get my money. He's kind of trying to really stop me, it seems like. And I'm kind of telling him, look, what do I have to do? So it became this real big ordeal. And at the end of it all, it just so happened to be that the only way with this current policy that I could get my money is if I was either terminated or I didn't work for the company anymore. There was no way for me to take a loan, which I was willing to do. I basically couldn't touch the money at all until I didn't work for the employer. So that got me thinking, and crazy enough, around that time, I was willing to do what it took to get that money. And around that time, a friend of my wife said that, I have a job offer for you if you're interested, and you can work with me. So I was like, okay, well, what are we talking? Because I'm like, if we do this, I can get a large chunk of money that I could potentially use to buy a property and, oh, okay, Hail Mary kind of thing, right? So I ended up doing it. I quit my job as a sheet metal worker, and this is hilarious, but I was delivering furniture for Cardi's Furniture with a buddy of mine. So he was a driver and I was just a helper. So I drastically reduced my pay just on a whim that if I do this, it's going to be something that I have to take very seriously if I end up getting this money, and I have to actually do it. So another thing to try to hold myself accountable, right? And I ended up doing just that. I got money from my 401k probably a few months after I had quit, and I had a large chunk in the bank now, and I was making, I think, $140 a day working, delivering furniture, right? Crazy. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Let you guys try to figure out what I did with the money, how much money I had got, and whether or not that was the start of everything for me or if it fell apart. But regardless, it's still a pretty interesting story because it goes against the grain with what a lot of people tell you to do. And I kind of like that, actually. You know, I think a lot of people have bad advice, and I may be one of them. Don't take my advice if it doesn't work for you. But if it works for you, great. Again, if you guys stayed and watched this whole thing, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and hope you guys have a great day, night, morning, whatever it is. Thanks again for watching.